Welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today on the show, we have Rebecca Ward. She is a marriage and family therapist. She's the author of the book, The Paper Tiger Syndrome, How to Liberate Yourself from the Illusion of Fear. There's an excerpt from that book on Kevin MD. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, Kevin.
So we'll get into your excerpt and book in a little bit, but first off, just briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
So I've had a lot of my own traumas and I have gone through my own struggles with a lot of medical trauma, actually. I've lost my two boys. I had a third trimester loss and they were born alive, didn't survive past the first day. It was life-changing, of course, that experience, and had several bouts with cancer over the years following that, from what I believe is unprocessed grief that manifested in my body, and it turned into toxicity in the system. So lots of medical trauma. Have been really close to the medical community for a long time and have a lot of folks in my own family who have worked in hospitals as nurses and physicians. So I deeply care about this community and know how much, folks in this industry are impacted by trauma themselves. That secondary trauma that you're all exposed to day in and day out is near and dear to my heart, and coach a lot of physicians as well in terms of, regulating their own nervous system. So it's a topic that and a community that I'm deeply close to and care about.
Now, is there a typical case, study, story that you could share of a clinician coming to you with secondary trauma? And what would you do in the office with them?
Yeah. So, yes, I had a heart surgeon actually who came to me for a while. We did some coaching around his own trauma. The system in which he works is rather toxic. There's a lot of trauma again in the system, people exposed to that. And when people are dysregulated in their nervous systems, they don't behave at their best. There's a lot of high risk. Everybody in this community is, the demands, the pressures to try to help their patients. Depending on what your role is, you actually are the one that is responsible for keeping someone alive. And he was one of those people. He's a heart surgeon. That level of stress had a tremendous impact on his ability to function. So we worked very closely with a lot of the tools and practices that are in the book about how to regulate his nervous system so that when he was exposed to secondary trauma, he could more effectively respond. It was really critical to his role as a surgeon, because if you're going into the OR and you're dysregulated, there's a higher chance of errors, of mistakes in a system when your own nervous system isn't regulated, right? You don't have access to your higher order thinking. You're in a nervous system that's in constant communication with that amygdala, and it's on high alert all the time. So that access to your higher order thinking is compromised. So that was really important, not just for himself and to lower his own stress levels, that stress response going on all the time in that environment is just wreaking havoc on all the medical staff that are exposed to that day in and day out. So that practice of regulating his nervous system was essential to his overall health, well-being, and his ability to function as a surgeon. And it changed everything for him. He would come to his sessions running through the hospital. He couldn't wait to come see me and work on his regulation. He always felt better, and he took those tools and implemented them so that he could not only do that for himself, but he started teaching the people that he worked with how to do it. So it's a practice that I think every medical professional needs to put in place, is to regulate their own nervous system.
And you talk more about that in your book and Kevin MD article. Your Kevin MD article is titled "The Body is the Gateway to the Original Blueprint." Your book is titled "The Paper Tiger Syndrome: How to Liberate Yourself from the Illusion of Fear." Now, for those of you who get a chance to read your excerpt on Kevin MD, just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to share that particular one.
Yeah, I talk about the original blueprint, and the original blueprint is what we get. We come into this world. This is my philosophy.
Hmm.
We come into this world, we inhabit a body, and when we come in, we are the purest expression of our soul. We inhabit that body. And then over time, throughout childhood, throughout adulthood, all the stress and the experiences that we have naturally have as human beings pull us further and further away from that pure self. And it's very simple for us to understand that by just going inside and recognizing somewhere along the line, some part of
Hmm.
myself is lost, right? So it's all, I believe, by design. That mechanism inside of that nervous system that is part of our primitive wiring, that fight, flight, and freeze is still the main default for all humans.
Hmm.
That innate need to survive, literally to survive, is designed to help us either function, regulate the nervous system to make the distinction between real and perceived threat, or it's going to be dysregulated so that what we call the paper tiger, which is a perceived threat, it's the
Hmm.
illusion of fear, can run us constantly and take down the nervous system, draw down our internal resources and cause stress on the system. So what you want to do is regulate that nervous system and reconnect back to that pure expression of your soul, the original blueprint. And that's essentially your system, your nervous system is designed to give you two options. You can either recognize everything as a saber-toothed tiger or recognize the distinction between what is a real threat and a paper tiger, perceived threat. So that's what the article is about understanding, first of all, how your nervous system functions. And underneath all of that is that vagus nerve that helps to regulate the nervous system, and those practices in the book that teach you how to do that. Once you get through all that, once you're regulating that nervous system, your stress response goes down, the fear goes down, and you have more connection to that original blueprint, more contentment, more peace, more joy inside yourself, and you're far more effective in your personal and professional life.
If you have a physician that you're talking
Yeah.
to and you want to regulate their nervous system, what exactly would you say or do? What kind of techniques would you teach that physician to do that?
Yeah, great question. So usually it's relatively easy because most physicians understand their own anatomy,
Hmm.
right? So I talk about the vagus nerve, and the
Mm.
vagus nerve is at the core of our nervous system. It's what connects all of our major organs. It's essentially the network of communications between your nervous system and your brain. And when that vagus nerve perceives a threat, it constricts all of your major vital organs and channels energy away from their ability to function and do their job and channel towards a perceived threat. And what that does is it compromises the immune system to fight off disease, increases your stress levels, can put unnecessary stress on your organs. And the practice of this breath work, this what I call the VU breathing method, it was not I didn't design that method. It's a method that's existed well before this book and developed by Dr. Peter Levine. That VU breathing method is the way you settle that vagus nerve,
Hmm.
the way that you settle the nervous system. So it's a very simple practice, but it is very important. And over time, what happens is that practice of the vagus nerve, the VU breathing method that vibrates that vagus nerve, if you repeat that over and over again, it changes your neural plasticity, your neural pathways, so that your new way of being is to be regulated, to be settled in your nervous system and not responding to perceived threats. So I explain that to my physicians, and they notice almost an immediate difference because
Mm.
their systems are so dysregulated that any reduction in that stress level from doing that practice, they notice almost immediately.
So you said almost immediately. In general, how long does it take for your coaching methods and breathing techniques and other techniques to regulate the nervous system? How long does that take before it
Yeah.
becomes effective?
Yeah. So any practice that you take, if you repeat a practice 300 times, these are general numbers, of
Hmm.
course, but if you repeat a practice like the VU breathing method 300 times, it's in your muscle memory.
Hmm.
So if you practice that VU breathing method 10 times a day for 30 days, it's in your muscle memory. That's not that long, right? So you do that at night for 5 minutes, it's in your muscle memory. If you repeat that same practice 10 times a day for 10 months, that's 3,000 times. It's not just in your muscle memory, it is your new way of being. It's
Mm,
in it's in your neurophysiology. So it's like brushing your teeth at that point. And a lot of folks don't even have to continue to repeat the practice after that. I did that myself. These are all practices I've applied myself. So I don't teach anything that hasn't worked for me. And now, because I'm so practiced at the VU breathing method, I don't have to practice it every day. I notice when my system is starting to dysregulate, and I'll do a few of the VU breaths, and it changes everything. So it just becomes kind of your normal, good self-care, good way to regulate the inside of your body, right?
mm.
We're so focused on the external and how we look in our society, and we're not paying enough attention to how this internal system is driving us, is running us. And, to really focus in on that, I think is the most important thing we can do.
We're talking to Rebecca Ward. She's a marriage and family therapist, and she's the author of the book, The Paper Tiger Syndrome: How to Liberate Yourself from the Illusion of Fear. Rebecca, what are some of the other main points that you want my clinician audience to come away with after reading your book?
Well, I think that the main thing is to be aware of how your system is functioning. That awareness, for a lot of people, not just physicians, but most human beings, don't really fully understand how our systems function. And to me, the most important thing is to start with somatic awareness, your body awareness, right?
Hmm.
To understand how that nervous system functions and how it is running you. But the other piece is that I think everyone needs to understand is how important a support system is. When I was going through my own medical traumas, the medical community and my own personal network were essential. The way that the doctors treated me, the nurses treated me, it changed everything. It changed how I moved through all of that trauma, because that connection and that support was essential for me. So, but just like a therapist, just like me, doctors, nurses, everybody in the medical community, we need our own support. We don't pay enough attention to the support we need, right? So
Hmm.
I would say that I want people to walk away really normalizing the need for your own support, that we all need that. And I would say anyone who's in any kind of helping profession should have their own support systems, a therapist or somebody, a coach, somebody to help support you. Most of what everybody does in the helping
Hmm.
profession is help other people. And there isn't enough focus on who's going to help me, who's going to be here to support me. So it's just to normalize that, to accept that the help from other people is essential to not only your own well-being, but the well-being of the people that you support, because you're going to burn out if you don't take care of yourself.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
Oh, how much I appreciate all of you, all the hard work, and anybody who goes into this line of work is, they're just, you're all just so incredible. And if your patients don't thank you enough, I thank you, because we need people like you who've got hearts and minds that are so dedicated and devoted. And I just am so grateful to the medical community in general for all the help that they've given me over the years. I'm forever grateful and appreciative. So thank you. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.